Marcus Thompson never believed in zombie movies until the emergency broadcast interrupted. His morning coffee. The anchor's trembling voice announced widespread attacks across major cities, but Marcus dismissed it as another hoax until he saw his neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez stumbling across her lawn with chunks missing from her neck. Her vacant eyes locked onto his window and she began clawing at the glass with fingernails that had turned black. The transformation had started 3 days earlier in downtown Chicago. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a CDC researcher, had been studying tissue samples from a mysterious outbreak at a pharmaceutical facility when the first victim arrived at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The patient, a security guard named David Chin, exhibited symptoms unlike anything in medical literature. His body temperature had dropped to near hypothermic levels, yet he remained conscious and increasingly aggressive. Elena watched through reinforced glass as David's condition deteriorated rapidly. His skin took on a grayish pallor, and his movements became jerky and uncoordinated. Within hours he had lost the ability to speak coherently, responding only to visual stimuli with violent outbursts. The medical team attempted standard treatments, but nothing slowed his decline. Meanwhile, across the city, former Marine Sergeant Jake Williams was preparing for another day at his security consulting firm when reports began flooding social media. Videos showed people attacking others with their teeth, displaying inhuman strength and apparent immunity to pain. Jake's military training kicked in as he recognized the signs of a developing crisis. The outbreak's epicenter traced back to Meridian Pharmaceuticals, where Dr. Amanda Foster had been conducting classified research on neural enhancement compounds. Her team had been working on a serum designed to accelerate healing in combat injuries, but something had gone terribly wrong. The compound had mutated, creating a pathogen that attacked the brain's higher functions while leaving primitive survival instincts intact. Amanda had tried to contain the breach, but infected lab animals had already contaminated the facility's water supply. Workers began showing symptoms within hours, and the infection spread through casual contact. By the time authorities arrived, 12 people had been infected, and 3 had already died and reanimated. Elena received the emergency call while examining David's latest blood samples. The pathogen appeared to be a hybrid of viral and bacterial components, unlike anything in existing databases. It targeted the prefrontal cortex while leaving the brainstem intact, effectively reducing victims to basic predatory instincts. The infected retained enough motor function to move and hunt, but lost all capacity for reason or recognition. Jake's phone buzzed with messages from his former unit members stationed across the country. Similar outbreaks were occurring simultaneously in Los Angeles, New York, and Miami. The pattern suggested coordinated release rather than natural spread, raising questions about potential bioterrorism. His contacts in military intelligence confirmed that several pharmaceutical facilities had reported security breaches in recent weeks. As news spread, panic began overtaking rational response. Marcus watched from his apartment as neighbors fled their homes, loading cars with whatever supplies they could carry. The streets filled with abandoned vehicles as people realized that normal transportation had become impossible. Emergency services were overwhelmed, and communication networks began failing under the strain. Elena's research team worked frantically to understand the pathogen's mechanism. Initial tests suggested that the infection required direct fluid contact, but the reanimated victims seemed capable of surviving for extended periods without food or water. Their bodies showed signs of rapid decomposition, yet they maintained surprising mobility and strength. The infected displayed pack-hunting behavior, drawn to sound and movement. They showed no fear of injury and continued attacking even when suffering massive trauma. Traditional law enforcement weapons proved inadequate against victims who felt no pain and required destruction of brain tissue to stop permanently. Jake began organizing his neighborhood into defensive groups, drawing on his military experience to establish secure perimeters. He recognized that civilian populations were unprepared for this type of threat. Most people had no experience with violence and would struggle to take necessary actions for survival. Dr. Foster's research notes revealed that the original compound had been designed to accelerate cellular regeneration, but contamination from an unknown source had created the current pathogen. She suspected that foreign agents had deliberately sabotaged the project, though she couldn't prove it. The timing of multiple simultaneous outbreaks across different facilities supported this theory. As the first day concluded, authorities estimated that over 10,000 people had been infected nationwide. The pathogen's rapid spread and the infected's aggressive behavior created a cascade effect, with each victim potentially infecting dozens of others. Traditional containment methods proved useless against an enemy that felt no pain and showed no self-preservation instincts. Marcus watched the sun set over his transformed neighborhood, knowing that everything had changed forever. The comfortable world of morning coffee and casual conversations had been replaced by something far more primitive and dangerous. Survival now depended on adapting to a reality where the dead walked among the living, and humanity's greatest threat came from within. The morning of the second day brought no relief. Marcus discovered that his apartment building's main entrance had been breached during the night. Bloodstains marked the lobby floor, and the security desk sat empty with chair overturned. Through the stairwell window, he could see infected individuals wandering the streets in increasing numbers, their movements becoming more coordinated as they seemed to learn from each encounter. Elena's laboratory had become a fortress of scientific determination. Her team had worked through the night analyzing tissue samples and behavioral patterns. The pathogen showed remarkable adaptability, mutating slightly in each host while maintaining its core aggressive characteristics. More disturbing was the discovery that infected individuals retained fragments of muscle memory, allowing them to open doors, climb stairs, and use simple tools. Jake's neighborhood defense group had grown to 37 people, ranging from teenagers to elderly residents. He established a command center in the local community center, which offered multiple exits and reinforced construction. The group included Maria Santos, a former paramedic who became their medical officer, and Robert Kim, an engineer who helped design defensive barriers. The military response began with National Guard units deployed to major cities, but they quickly discovered that standard crowd control tactics were ineffective against infected populations. Colonel Patricia Hayes, commanding the Chicago response, realized that her troops were facing an enemy unlike anything in their training. The infected showed no fear of weapons, no response to verbal commands, and no recognition of surrender. Dr. Foster had managed to escape her compromised facility with critical research data. She joined Elena's team, bringing insider knowledge about the pathogen's development. Together, they discovered that the infection had a 24-hour incubation period, during which victims appeared normal but were already contagious. This meant that the actual infected population was potentially 10 times larger than visible cases. The pathogen's transmission method proved more complex than initially understood. While direct fluid contact remained the primary vector, the researchers found evidence of limited airborne transmission in confined spaces. This discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community and forced authorities to revise their containment strategies. Marcus encountered his first infected neighbor when Mrs. Patterson from apartment 3B appeared in the hallway. She had been a kind elderly woman who always smiled and offered homemade cookies. Now she moved with jerky, predatory motions, her eyes clouded white, and dried blood covering her floral dress. When she spotted Marcus, she let out a low growl and began approaching with unexpected speed. The infected individual's attack forced Marcus to defend himself using a baseball bat he had found in the building's storage room. The encounter shocked him with its brutality and the realization that his former neighbor was truly gone. The person who had lived across the hall for 3 years had been replaced by something driven purely by hunger and aggression. Elena's team made a breakthrough when they discovered that the pathogen couldn't survive in temperatures above 140 degrees Fahrenheit. This finding suggested that fire could be an effective weapon against infected individuals, though implementing this knowledge required careful consideration of collateral damage and public safety. Jake's group experienced their first major assault when approximately 15 infected individuals converged on their position. The attack came at dawn, suggesting that the infected were developing tactical awareness beyond simple hunger responses. The defenders managed to repel the assault, but not without casualties. 2 group members were bitten and had to be isolated pending the development of symptoms. Communication networks continued degrading as infrastructure failed and personnel abandoned their posts. Cell phone towers went offline, internet connectivity became sporadic, and emergency services ceased functioning in many areas. This isolation forced survivor groups to rely on radio communications and face-to-face coordination. The economic impact became apparent as supply chains collapsed. Grocery stores emptied within hours, gas stations ran dry, and banking systems failed. Currency became meaningless in a world where survival necessities held all value. Barter systems emerged quickly among survivor groups, with ammunition, medical supplies, and food becoming the primary mediums of exchange. Colonel Hayes received orders to implement martial law, but her forces were spread too thin to maintain effective control. Military units found themselves fighting a war of attrition against an enemy that could replace losses by converting civilian populations. Traditional military advantages like air support and heavy weapons proved limited against scattered, mobile targets hiding among civilian infrastructure. The infected showed increasing signs of collective behavior. They began moving in larger groups, demonstrating basic coordination in their attacks. Some survivors reported seeing infected individuals who appeared to be directing others, suggesting that the pathogen might preserve certain leadership capabilities in some hosts. Maria Santos documented the psychological impact on survivors. People who had never experienced violence were forced to make split-second decisions about life and death. The stress of constant vigilance, combined with the loss of familiar social structures, created widespread trauma that would persist long after the immediate crisis ended. By the third day, the infection had spread beyond urban centers into suburban and rural areas. Marcus found himself leading a group of survivors from his apartment building, including the building manager Tom Bradley and a young mother named Jennifer Walsh with her 8-year-old daughter Lucy. The group had decided to attempt reaching Jake's established safe zone after hearing radio broadcasts about organized resistance. Elena's research took an alarming turn when she discovered that the pathogen was continuing to evolve. Later generation infected showed improved motor skills and problem-solving abilities. They had learned to avoid obvious traps and showed rudimentary planning capabilities. Some infected individuals had been observed using tools and working together to overcome obstacles. The journey across the city proved treacherous for Marcus's group. Streets that had been familiar neighborhoods now resembled war zones. Abandoned vehicles created maze-like obstacles, while infected individuals lurked in shadows and empty buildings. The group moved slowly, checking each intersection and building before proceeding. Jake's community had grown to over 200 survivors, but resources were becoming strained. The engineer Robert Kim had designed an effective water purification system, but food supplies were running low. Scavenging missions became increasingly dangerous as infected populations grew denser and more aggressive. Dr. Foster's analysis revealed that the pathogen's original design had included self-limiting mechanisms to prevent uncontrolled spread. However, the sabotage that created the current outbreak had removed these safeguards. The infection now showed no signs of natural decline and could potentially continue spreading indefinitely. Military forces began implementing extreme measures as conventional tactics proved inadequate. Colonel Hayes authorized the use of incendiary weapons to create firebreaks around major population centers. These drastic actions saved lives but came at the cost of destroying entire neighborhoods and displacing thousands of survivors. The infected population had begun exhibiting disturbing new behaviors. They showed increased aggression toward uninfected individuals while displaying protective instincts toward other infected. This development suggested that the pathogen might be creating a new form of social structure among its hosts. Marcus's group encountered their first major obstacle when they discovered that the main bridge connecting their area to Jake's safe zone had been destroyed by military forces. The explosion had been intended to contain the outbreak, but it also trapped survivors on both sides. The group faced a difficult choice between attempting a dangerous river crossing or finding an alternative route through heavily infected territory. Elena's team made a significant discovery when they found that certain individuals showed natural immunity to the pathogen. These immune individuals had specific genetic markers that prevented the infection from taking hold. However, immune individuals were rare, representing less than 5% of the population. The breakdown of social order accelerated as government authorities lost control. Police departments ceased functioning, courts closed, and administrative services collapsed. In some areas, military units went rogue, establishing their own controlled territories. Other regions fell under the control of armed civilian groups with varying degrees of organization and morality. Jake implemented strict quarantine protocols after several new arrivals showed signs of infection. The community had to balance compassion with security, creating isolated areas where potentially infected individuals could be monitored. This policy created tension among survivors who had lost family members to the quarantine process. The infected began showing signs of territorial behavior, establishing areas of concentration around food sources and strategic locations. These infected zones became increasingly difficult to penetrate, as the concentrated populations could overwhelm even well-armed groups. Survivors learned to avoid these areas entirely, further limiting their mobility and resources. Dr. Foster's research indicated that the pathogen had been designed as a weapon, with specific characteristics that made it ideal for disrupting civilian populations. The infection's incubation period, transmission methods, and behavioral effects all suggested deliberate engineering rather than natural evolution. Communication between survivor groups became critical for coordinating resources and sharing information about infected movements. Jake's community established radio networks connecting with other safe zones, creating a loose confederation of survivors. These networks provided vital intelligence about safe routes, resource locations, and infected population movements. The psychological impact of the outbreak intensified as survivors struggled with the loss of loved ones and the constant threat of death. Children like Lucy Walsh showed remarkable resilience, but adults often struggled with depression and panic attacks. Maria Santos worked to provide psychological support, but her resources were limited. Marcus's group finally reached the river crossing point, only to discover that the infected had learned to wade through shallow water. Several infected individuals emerged from the riverbank, forcing the group into a running battle. Tom Bradley was injured during the fight, slowing the group's progress and increasing their vulnerability. The day ended with Marcus's group taking shelter in an abandoned warehouse, treating Tom's wounds and planning their next move. The infected could be heard moving outside, their numbers seeming to grow larger each hour. The group realized that their survival depended on reaching Jake's safe zone before their limited supplies ran out. The fourth day began with a devastating discovery. Tom Bradley had developed a fever during the night, and his bite wound showed signs of infection. The group faced the horrible reality that their friend and leader was likely infected with the pathogen. Tom remained conscious and rational, but everyone knew that his condition would deteriorate rapidly. Elena's laboratory received an encrypted message from a surviving government facility. Military scientists had been working on a potential cure, but their research required live infected subjects for testing. The message requested that civilian researchers provide detailed behavioral observations and tissue samples to support the development effort. Jake's community detected large movements of infected individuals converging on their location. Robert Kim's surveillance system showed groups approaching from multiple directions, suggesting coordinated action that exceeded previous infected capabilities. The community prepared for what appeared to be their largest defensive action yet. The infected population had begun exhibiting hierarchical behavior, with certain individuals appearing to direct others. These alpha infected showed enhanced problem-solving abilities and seemed capable of basic strategic planning. They directed other infected toward specific targets and coordinated group attacks with alarming effectiveness. Marcus struggled with the decision about Tom's fate. The group couldn't risk keeping an infected person among them, but Tom had been instrumental in their survival. Lucy Walsh, despite her young age, understood the situation and suggested that Tom could help them reach safety before his condition worsened. Military units reported that infected individuals were beginning to use weapons and tools more effectively. Colonel Hayes documented cases where infected persons had operated vehicles, used firearms, and employed basic tactics during attacks. This evolution suggested that the pathogen preserved more cognitive function than initially believed. Dr. Foster's analysis revealed that the pathogen had been designed to create a new form of human variant rather than simply causing death. The infected retained enough intelligence to be useful as soldiers or workers while losing the capacity for independent thought or resistance to control. The government facility's message included disturbing intelligence about the outbreak's origin. Foreign agents had indeed sabotaged multiple research facilities, but the attack was part of a larger plan to destabilize the entire country. Similar outbreaks were occurring simultaneously across allied nations, suggesting a coordinated global assault. Jake's defensive preparations included establishing kill zones with overlapping fields of fire. The community had accumulated a substantial arsenal through scavenging and had trained civilian members in basic combat techniques. However, they faced the challenge of fighting an enemy that felt no pain and showed no fear. Marcus made the difficult decision to allow Tom to guide them toward the safe zone while monitoring his condition carefully. Tom understood the risk he posed and agreed to distance himself from the group if his symptoms worsened. The arrangement required constant vigilance but offered their best chance of reaching safety. The infected assault on Jake's community began at midday with unprecedented coordination. Multiple groups attacked simultaneously from different directions, forcing the defenders to spread their resources thin. The infected showed tactical awareness, using some individuals as distractions while others attempted to breach defensive positions. Elena's team discovered that the pathogen responded to certain radio frequencies, causing infected individuals to become agitated or disoriented. This finding suggested the possibility of developing sonic weapons that could disrupt infected coordination. However, the effect was temporary and required powerful broadcasting equipment. The battle for Jake's community lasted several hours, with defenders managing to repel the initial assault but suffering significant casualties. Maria Santos worked frantically to treat wounded survivors while monitoring for signs of infection. The community's medical supplies were running dangerously low. Tom's condition deteriorated rapidly as the group approached the safe zone. He began experiencing confusion and aggressive impulses, forcing Marcus to make contingency plans. The group prepared restraints and discussed protocols for handling Tom's transformation if it occurred before they reached safety. The infected forces regrouped for a second assault, demonstrating learning capabilities that exceeded all previous observations. They adapted their tactics based on the first attack's failure, concentrating their forces on the weakest defensive points. The defenders realized they were facing an enemy that could improve its performance through experience. Communication intercepts revealed that other survivor communities were reporting similar coordinated attacks. The infected population appeared to be following a systematic strategy to eliminate organized resistance. This development suggested that the pathogen included programming for specific behavioral patterns. Marcus's group finally reached visual contact with Jake's safe zone, but they were separated by a large group of infected individuals. The infected had apparently learned to establish roadblocks and ambush points, demonstrating strategic thinking that challenged fundamental assumptions about their capabilities. Jake's community prepared for evacuation as the second assault began. The infected forces had grown significantly, apparently drawing reinforcements from surrounding areas. The defenders faced the possibility of abandoning their carefully constructed safe zone and attempting to escape with minimal supplies. The day ended with multiple crises reaching simultaneous climax. Marcus's group was trapped within sight of safety, Jake's community faced overwhelming assault, and Elena's research suggested that the infected were evolving faster than anyone had anticipated. The survival of organized human resistance hung in the balance. The fifth day brought desperate measures as Jake's community faced annihilation. The infected had evolved beyond individual predators into a coordinated army that demonstrated strategic planning and tactical flexibility. Robert Kim's engineering expertise became crucial as the community attempted to create an escape route through underground utility tunnels. Tom Bradley's transformation accelerated during the critical moments when Marcus's group needed to move. He retained enough humanity to recognize his condition and made the ultimate sacrifice, creating a distraction that allowed the group to break through the infected roadblock. His final act of courage demonstrated that some trace of human consciousness persisted even as the pathogen took control. Elena's research team received devastating news from the government facility. The military's attempted cure had failed catastrophically, transforming test subjects into an even more dangerous variant. These enhanced infected showed increased intelligence and physical capabilities while maintaining the pathogen's aggressive characteristics. The infected assault on Jake's community intensified with the appearance of the enhanced variants. These new infected individuals displayed leadership qualities, directing regular infected with apparent strategic understanding. They coordinated complex attacks that overwhelmed traditional defensive positions. Marcus's group, reduced by Tom's sacrifice, finally reached the safe zone's outer perimeter. However, they discovered that the community was in the process of evacuating through Kim's tunnel system. Jennifer Walsh and her daughter Lucy had to be carried through narrow passages while infected individuals hammered on the barriers above. Colonel Hayes received orders to implement a nuclear option. Military leadership had concluded that conventional weapons were inadequate against the evolving infected population. The plan involved tactical nuclear strikes on major infected concentrations, accepting massive civilian casualties as the price for stopping the outbreak. The tunnel evacuation proved treacherous as the infected discovered the escape route. Enhanced infected individuals showed problem-solving abilities that allowed them to navigate the underground system. The evacuation became a running battle through dark, confined spaces where traditional advantages were neutralized. Dr. Foster's analysis revealed that the pathogen had been designed with multiple evolutionary stages. The current outbreak represented only the initial phase, with the infection programmed to develop additional capabilities over time. The enhanced variants were part of the pathogen's planned progression toward creating a new dominant species. Jake's leadership skills proved crucial during the evacuation. He organized rearguard actions that bought time for civilians to escape while maintaining group cohesion under extreme stress. His military training adapted to the unique challenges of fighting an enemy that combined human intelligence with inhuman persistence. The infected population began exhibiting collective intelligence that exceeded the sum of individual capabilities. They demonstrated coordinated behavior across large geographical areas, suggesting some form of communication or shared consciousness. This development challenged fundamental assumptions about the pathogen's effects on human cognition. Marcus integrated his group with Jake's evacuees, combining their survival experience with the larger community's resources. However, the merged group faced the challenge of maintaining unity while moving through hostile territory. Different leadership styles and survival philosophies created tension during critical moments. Elena's team discovered that the pathogen had been designed to interface with specific technologies. The infection included dormant code that could be activated by certain electronic signals, potentially allowing external control over infected populations. This finding suggested that the outbreak was part of a larger plan for conquest rather than mere destruction. The government facility's final transmission revealed the scope of the conspiracy. The outbreak had been orchestrated by a coalition of hostile nations working with domestic collaborators. The goal was not to destroy the country but to create a population that could be controlled and directed by external forces. Military units began implementing the nuclear option despite civilian objections. Colonel Hayes struggled with orders that would sacrifice thousands of uninfected survivors to contain the outbreak. The decision represented a fundamental shift from protection to damage control, acknowledging that traditional society had already collapsed. The evacuating survivors faced attacks from infected individuals who had learned to use vehicles and weapons effectively. These enhanced infected demonstrated tactical coordination that matched military training, suggesting that the pathogen preserved professional skills while redirecting loyalty and purpose. Jake's group discovered that the infected had established control centers where enhanced variants directed large-scale operations. These facilities represented a new form of organization that combined human intelligence with the pathogen's collective behavior. Destroying these centers became a priority for survivor resistance. The day's events culminated in a choice between immediate survival and long-term resistance. Jake's community could continue fleeing, preserving their lives but abandoning any hope of fighting back. Alternatively, they could attempt to establish a new base from which to conduct organized resistance against the infected population. Marcus found himself supporting Jake's decision to establish a resistance base. The group had accumulated valuable intelligence about infected behavior and capabilities. More importantly, they had proven that humans could adapt and fight back against the pathogen's effects. The fifth day ended with the survivor community taking shelter in an abandoned military facility. The location offered defensive advantages but also presented the challenge of establishing sustainable operations. The group faced the reality that their war against the infected had only begun. The abandoned Fort Morrison provided Jake's community with their first real hope since the outbreak began. The facility's underground bunkers offered protection from infected assault while providing access to military equipment and supplies. Robert Kim's engineering expertise proved invaluable in restoring power systems and defensive capabilities. Elena's research team established a laboratory in the facility's medical wing, continuing their work on understanding the pathogen's evolution. They discovered that infected individuals showed decreased activity during certain weather conditions, suggesting environmental factors that could be exploited for tactical advantage. The nuclear strikes began at dawn, targeting major infected concentrations in urban areas. The devastating attacks eliminated millions of infected individuals but also destroyed critical infrastructure and killed countless uninfected survivors. Colonel Hayes watched the mushroom clouds rise over cities she had sworn to protect. Marcus took responsibility for training civilian members in combat techniques. His experience during the journey to safety had taught him valuable lessons about fighting infected individuals. The training focused on mobility, teamwork, and psychological preparation for the brutality of close combat. The infected population's response to the nuclear attacks demonstrated their collective intelligence. Rather than being demoralized, they adapted their behavior to avoid concentrated formations. Enhanced infected individuals began establishing smaller, more dispersed groups that were harder to target with conventional weapons. Jake's leadership evolved as he transitioned from emergency survival to building sustainable resistance. The community established councils for different aspects of operations, including defense, resource management, and intelligence gathering. This democratic approach helped maintain morale while ensuring diverse perspectives in decision-making. Dr. Foster's research revealed that the pathogen had been designed with a kill switch that could theoretically stop the infection. However, activating this mechanism required access to the original research data and specialized equipment. The information was likely held in secure government facilities that might no longer exist. The facility's communication equipment allowed contact with other survivor communities across the country. These connections revealed that the outbreak had followed similar patterns everywhere, with infected populations evolving at comparable rates. The coordination suggested centralized control rather than random mutation. Jennifer Walsh emerged as a valuable community member, using her background in education to establish schooling for children like her daughter Lucy. Maintaining normal activities became crucial for psychological health, helping survivors remember what they were fighting to preserve. Enhanced infected individuals began demonstrating advanced problem-solving abilities. They learned to disable defensive systems, bypass security measures, and coordinate complex attacks. These capabilities suggested that the pathogen preserved professional skills while redirecting them toward conquest. The community's first major operation involved raiding a nearby infected control center. Intelligence gathering had revealed that these facilities contained enhanced infected who directed regional operations. Destroying the center could disrupt infected coordination across a large area. Maria Santos documented the psychological impact of extended combat against infected individuals. Survivors developed trauma responses that differed from traditional combat stress. Fighting former humans created unique emotional challenges that required specialized treatment approaches. The raid on the infected control center revealed disturbing discoveries. The facility contained evidence of systematic organization, with infected individuals performing specific roles and following complex hierarchies. The operation suggested that the pathogen was creating a new form of society rather than simply causing chaos. Elena's team found research data at the infected facility that confirmed their worst fears. The pathogen had been designed to preserve human knowledge and skills while eliminating independent thought. The infected population was intended to become a workforce controlled by external forces. Jake's community faced the challenge of integrating intelligence from the captured facility. The data revealed infected population movements, control structures, and planned operations. However, acting on this information required risking valuable personnel in dangerous missions. The infected response to the control center's destruction demonstrated their adaptability. They quickly established alternative command structures and modified their operational patterns. The attack had caused temporary disruption but failed to create lasting damage to their organizational capabilities. Marcus led a reconnaissance mission to evaluate other infected facilities in the region. The mission revealed that the infected had begun establishing manufacturing capabilities, using human knowledge to produce weapons and equipment. This development suggested long-term planning that extended beyond simple conquest. The community's resource situation improved as they gained access to the military facility's supplies. However, they faced the challenge of maintaining equipment and systems without external support. Self-sufficiency became crucial for long-term survival. Communication with other survivor communities revealed varying levels of success in fighting the infected. Some groups had been completely destroyed, while others had achieved temporary victories. The mixed results suggested that survival depended on adapting strategies to local conditions. The day ended with the community establishing regular patrol schedules and intelligence-gathering operations. They had transitioned from reactive survival to proactive resistance, but the infected population continued evolving to meet new challenges. The war for humanity's future had entered a new phase. The seventh day marked a turning point as Jake's community received an encrypted transmission from a government facility in Colorado. The message revealed that a coalition of scientists and military personnel had been working on a comprehensive solution to the outbreak. However, their research required cooperation from surviving communities and access to specific infected specimens. Elena's analysis of the captured research data revealed the pathogen's ultimate purpose. The infection had been designed to create a compliant workforce that retained human skills while eliminating capacity for rebellion or independent thought. The infected population was intended to serve as slave labor for the conquering forces. Marcus organized a specialized team to capture enhanced infected individuals for research purposes. The mission required careful planning and exceptional skill, as these targets possessed near-human intelligence combined with the pathogen's enhanced physical capabilities. The team included volunteers who understood the extreme risks involved. The infected population had begun establishing permanent settlements that resembled organized communities. These facilities included manufacturing areas, resource processing centers, and what appeared to be research installations. The development suggested that the pathogen was creating a functional society rather than mere chaos. Jake's community faced internal challenges as some members questioned the wisdom of continued resistance. The nuclear attacks had demonstrated the government's willingness to sacrifice survivors to contain the outbreak. Some argued that cooperation with the infected might offer better survival prospects than endless warfare. Dr. Foster's research indicated that the pathogen's kill switch mechanism was more complex than initially understood. Activating it required simultaneous actions at multiple locations, coordinated timing, and specific genetic markers that were extremely rare. The process would require unprecedented cooperation between survivor communities. The capture mission led by Marcus encountered unexpected resistance from infected individuals who had learned to anticipate human tactics. The enhanced infected showed awareness of military procedures and implemented countermeasures that suggested access to strategic knowledge. The team barely escaped with their target specimen. Communication with the Colorado facility revealed that similar outbreaks were occurring globally, but some countries had achieved partial success in containing the infection. These nations had implemented immediate quarantine measures and had access to research data that American facilities lacked. The infected settlements began producing advanced equipment that exceeded pre-outbreak technological capabilities. The infected population's collective intelligence, combined with preserved human knowledge, had created accelerated innovation. This development posed long-term threats that extended beyond immediate survival. Elena's examination of the captured enhanced infected revealed disturbing findings. The specimen retained fragments of original personality and memories but showed complete loyalty to the pathogen's objectives. The individual could discuss complex topics while simultaneously planning attacks on uninfected humans. Jake's community implemented new security measures as they discovered that infected infiltrators had been observing their operations. These infiltrators showed sophisticated understanding of human psychology and had been gathering intelligence for future attacks. The discovery forced a complete revision of operational procedures. The Colorado facility's research team had developed a potential vaccine that could prevent infection but couldn't reverse existing cases. The vaccine required rare biological components that were difficult to obtain and process. Production would require coordinated efforts from multiple survivor communities. Maria Santos documented the psychological impact of fighting an enemy that retained human intelligence. Survivors struggled with the reality that they were essentially fighting former humans who could think, plan, and adapt. The emotional burden of this warfare exceeded traditional combat stress. The infected population's technological advancement included the development of communication systems that allowed coordination across vast distances. These systems appeared to use quantum entanglement principles that were beyond pre-outbreak scientific understanding. The capability suggested that the pathogen enhanced rather than merely preserved human intelligence. Marcus's team discovered that the infected had been conducting experiments on captured humans. These experiments appeared focused on understanding human psychology and developing more effective conversion techniques. The findings suggested that the infected were working to improve their recruitment capabilities. The community's relationship with other survivor groups became crucial as they shared intelligence about infected capabilities and potential countermeasures. These alliances required careful negotiation and trust building among groups that had developed different survival strategies. Jake faced the challenge of maintaining community morale while acknowledging the scale of the threat they confronted. The infected population's technological and organizational advantages suggested that traditional military victory was unlikely. Alternative strategies focused on survival and preservation of human knowledge became paramount. The day's events culminated in a community meeting where members debated their fundamental objectives. Some argued for continued resistance regardless of prospects for victory. Others advocated for finding ways to coexist with the infected population. The decision would determine their future actions. Elena's research suggested that the pathogen's designers had included safeguards that could be exploited. However, accessing these safeguards required understanding the original creator's intentions and having access to their research facilities. The information might exist in secure government installations that remained operational. The seventh day ended with the community committed to continuing their resistance while seeking the Colorado facility's vaccine research. They had evolved from a desperate group of survivors into an organized resistance cell, but the infected population's capabilities continued expanding at an alarming rate. The eighth day brought the culmination of weeks of desperate struggle and gradual understanding. Jake's community had established contact with 17 other survivor groups across the continent, forming a loose network of resistance cells. The Colorado facility's vaccine research showed promise, but implementation required coordinated action that had never been attempted during the outbreak. Elena's team achieved a breakthrough when they successfully decoded the pathogen's original programming. The infection contained dormant subroutines that could be activated to reverse its effects. but only if specific conditions were met simultaneously across multiple locations. The discovery offered hope but required unprecedented cooperation and precise timing. Marcus led a joint operation with teams from 3 other communities to secure the necessary biological components for vaccine production. The mission required penetrating deep into infected territory to access a secure research facility. The infected population had evolved sophisticated defensive strategies that made such operations extremely dangerous. The infected settlements had begun producing weapons and equipment that exceeded pre-outbreak military capabilities. Their collective intelligence had accelerated technological development while their enhanced physical capabilities allowed implementation of designs that normal humans couldn't handle. The development posed existential threats to surviving human communities. Jake's leadership skills proved crucial in coordinating the multi-community alliance. Different groups had developed varying survival strategies and leadership structures that required careful negotiation. The alliance represented humanity's best hope for organized resistance, but it remained fragile and untested. Dr. Foster's analysis revealed that the pathogen's creators had been working on behalf of an extraterrestrial intelligence that sought to transform humanity into a suitable workforce. The infection was not merely a weapon but a conversion process designed to prepare Earth's population for integration into a galactic empire. The vaccine production facility required constant defense against infected assault. The infected population had identified the location as a critical threat and concentrated their forces accordingly. The battle for the facility became a symbol of humanity's determination to resist conversion. Communication intercepts revealed that the infected population was preparing for a coordinated global assault on remaining human settlements. The attack was scheduled to coincide with the arrival of the extraterrestrial forces that had orchestrated the outbreak. Humanity faced annihilation unless the vaccine could be deployed immediately. Elena's team successfully produced the first batch of vaccine doses, but the quantity was insufficient for widespread distribution. The community faced difficult decisions about who should receive priority protection. These choices would determine which aspects of human society could be preserved. The infected assault on the vaccine facility demonstrated their full capabilities. They employed advanced tactics, sophisticated weapons, and coordinated strategies that matched professional military units. The battle lasted 18 hours and resulted in heavy casualties on both sides. Marcus discovered that some infected individuals retained enough humanity to resist their programming under specific conditions. These individuals could provide valuable intelligence about infected operations and potentially serve as allies in the resistance. However, trusting converted humans required extraordinary faith and careful verification. The extraterrestrial contact revealed that Earth was one of many worlds that had been processed using similar methods. The infection technique had been refined through use on dozens of planets, creating efficient conversion processes that preserved useful knowledge while eliminating resistance. Humanity's situation was not unique but part of a larger pattern. Jake's community made the decision to distribute the vaccine to children and individuals with rare genetic markers that made them particularly valuable for resistance operations. The choice prioritized long-term survival over immediate military advantage, acknowledging that the current generation might not survive to see victory. The global coordination required for activating the pathogen's kill switch began as survivor communities across 6 continents prepared for simultaneous action. The operation required precise timing and flawless execution, with no possibility for second attempts. Failure would result in the complete conversion of humanity. Elena's final research revealed that the pathogen contained one critical vulnerability. The infection could be reversed if exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies broadcast from multiple locations simultaneously. However, the process would require sacrificing the infected populations to save the remaining uninfected humans. The climactic battle occurred as survivor communities worldwide attempted to activate the kill switch while defending against desperate infected assaults. The infected population's collective intelligence had anticipated this possibility and concentrated their forces to prevent the activation. The battle represented humanity's final stand. Marcus led the final assault on the primary transmission facility, fighting through waves of infected individuals who had devoted their remaining existence to preventing the activation. The battle required extraordinary courage and sacrifice from individuals who knew they were unlikely to survive. The kill switch activation succeeded, sending electromagnetic pulses across the globe that disrupted the pathogen's control over infected populations. The infected individuals collapsed simultaneously, their enhanced capabilities failing as the pathogen retry. This response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continue to nudge Claude along. Continue. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.